Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this because today we're unpacking a really counterintuitive argument about something we pretty much all consider an absolute, unquestionable good: empathy. The source material we're looking at challenges the very foundation of how we view compassion. It suggests that the feelings we trust the most might actually lead us completely astray if we aren't careful. So we're going to look at empathy versus mercy and why tenderness absolutely, fundamentally needs truth.
To kick things off, back in 1961, the Catholic novelist Flannery O'Connor wrote this incredibly provocative statement. She said, "In the absence of faith, we governed by tenderness, and tenderness long cut off from the source of tenderness ends in terror and in the fumes of the gas chamber." Wow, right? It's a remarkably heavy, startling thought. And our source brings this up to impartially report her profound warning. Basically, that governing purely by tenderness, relying solely on our raw, untethered feelings, might actually be incredibly dangerous to society.
Section 1. The danger of tenderness. So the source actually frames empathy not as this built-in virtue, but as a potential problem, which kind of flips our modern understanding of emotion completely upside down. You see, when O'Connor made her startling claim, she wasn't warning us about cruelty. I mean, cruelty's obvious, right? We all know to watch out for that. Instead, she was warning us about kindness, specifically a kindness unmoored from truth. Now, 60 years later, the source points out that we have a widely accepted name for this unmoored feeling. We call it empathy, and we almost universally call it a virtue. But the argument presented here asks us to seriously reconsider if it actually is.
Let's move to Section 2, the case against empathy, and see how this builds. The source turns to a 2016 book called Against Empathy by Yale psychologist Paul Bloom. What's absolutely crucial to note here is that Bloom, he's not a moralist or a theologian. He's a secular cognitive scientist, and he argues that empathy, which is that involuntary act of feeling what another person feels, is deeply innumerate. It literally cannot do the math. Think about it this way. The plight of one single identifiable child stuck in a well will emotionally move us way more than 1,000 starving strangers we can't see. Let's break down Bloom's specific critiques. Because empathy is mathematically blind, it becomes highly biased toward the visible and the familiar. It's inherently biased toward our own tribe. But even more strikingly, Bloom argues empathy is the engine of nearly every war and mob. Why? Because empathy rewards whoever performs their suffering the best. It's easily manipulated by whoever has the loudest voice, or, the most gripping visual, completely bypassing objective reality, justice, or fairness. It's wild to think about.
Section 3. Passions versus virtues. The source connects the dots between modern psychology and ancient philosophy, and this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating overlap. The cognitive scientist Paul Bloom, writing in 2016, had actually stumbled onto a concept that the Catholic theologian St. Thomas Aquinas worked out over 700 years ago, back in the 13th century. It is incredibly interesting when entirely different frameworks arrive at the exact same conclusion regarding human emotion and morality.
In Aquinas' framework, he categorized feelings like anger, fear, pity, and desire simply as passions. For Aquinas, these passions are just morally neutral raw material. They're just things that happen to us biologically and psychologically. They are definitely not virtues on their own. They only become virtuous when our reason steps in and actively orders them toward the true good. So in this view, feeling strongly about something doesn't automatically make you a good person. It just makes you a person experiencing a totally natural physical and emotional response.
Section 4. Empathy and mercy compared.
This brings us to the core contrast of this analysis, the stark difference between simply feeling something and actually doing something. Let's define our terms exactly as the source does. Empathy is defined as a passion. It's the involuntary, automatic experience of feeling with another person. So if I see you in pain, I might involuntarily wince. That's empathy. But crucially, it is a morally neutral passion. It's not by itself strictly good or evil. It's just an automatic reflex.
Now let's look at the contrast. When we talk about the willingness to actually relieve another person's suffering, to bear it with them and act for their actual good, the Catholic tradition gives that a different name entirely. It's called mercy. By contrast, mercy is a virtue, not a feeling. It's an active choice. It's an act of the will joined to truth and ordered to the good of the person right in front of you. Empathy feels with, but mercy acts for.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how this entire complex philosophy boils down to two completely different questions. Empathy asks, what does their pain make me feel? It's ultimately pretty self-referential. Mercy, on the other hand, asks, what does their good actually require? The The source points out that in our modern time, we've almost entirely stopped asking this second question. We are completely, almost exclusively, focused on the first.
Section 5. Rethinking the Good Samaritan.
To really cement this difference, the source uses an incredibly famous case study. Even if you aren't religious, you probably know the basic outline of this ancient parable. Let's walk through the steps of this story through this brand new lens. A man is beaten and left for dead. First, a priest sees the body and walks past. Second, a Levite sees the body and walks past. Now the source makes a profound observation here. We usually assume these were just cold, unfeeling men, but they almost certainly were not. They saw the beaten man, they likely felt that automatic wince of pity. They felt something, but they walked past anyway. It was the third man, the Samaritan, who actually stopped, bound the man's wounds, and paid for his care. The source argues that the priest and the Levite likely had empathy, but only the Samaritan had mercy.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from the parable. At the end of the story, Christ praises the Samaritan, but notice his exact words here. He says, "Go and do likewise." He absolutely does not say, "Go and feel likewise." We are never actually told what the Samaritan felt inside. His inner emotional state just isn't the point. He is praised entirely for his objective actions in reality.
Section 6. Submitting feeling to truth. So what happens when a whole society replaces truth-bound mercy with feeling-based apathy? Well, the source argues we sacrifice the silent to the loud, because apathy requires a performance of suffering to trigger our feelings. Consider this politically and socially diverse list of silent victims: the unborn child, the dying patient, the accused man, the enemy soldier, the unpopular neighbor. These individuals either have no voice, or they're too weak, or society simply doesn't want to hear them. They cannot perform their suffering. Therefore, the voices we can clearly hear, we treat with infinite tenderness, but the voices we don't hear, empathy simply lets them disappear.
So the crucial point is this: mercy cannot be louder than the good because it is strictly bound to justice and truth. Empathy has no such bounds. Tenderness without truth doesn't stay tender. It curdles. It picks favorites based on who is most visible. It ultimately builds the camps that the loud cheer for, while the silent are forced to fill them. It perfectly explains why Flannery O'Connor's initial warning about the fumes of the gas chamber lands so incredibly hard today.
So what is the solution presented by the source? The answer isn't to become cold or to suppress our humanity and just stop feeling entirely. No way. The answer is to intelligently order what we feel. The source outlines a clear, two-step solution using another biblical example. Step 1, let the feeling move you. Christ wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He felt the full weight of human grief. But then, step 2, act in the truth. He raised Lazarus from the dead. The feeling moved him, but he acted in truth. Empathy became sacrifice. Feeling became salvation. Mercy is simply what empathy becomes when it finally submits to truth. We conclude with this powerful wrap-up quote: "Tenderness cut off from its source ends in terror. Rejoined to its source, tenderness becomes mercy." It leaves us with a really profound challenge. The next time you feel that strong wave of empathy for a cause, a group, or a person, ask yourself, am I just feeling something because they're loud and visible? Or am I willing to submit that feeling to truth and actually do the hard work of mercy for their true good? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.